All righty, good. Well, thank you for doing this interview.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. So you were just in Miami recently, right?
I was. Is that where you are?
That's where I am.
Oh, what a pity we didn't connect there.
Right, right. So I wanted to cover a few different topics with you in this interview, and as you start to respond to the questions, it may lead in different directions. Wherever you need to go with things is fine.
Okie doke.
Just to get a little bit of an introduction for those who are watching or listening, I'm speaking with Patricia Cori, who's a renowned author, a teacher, lecturer, radio host, and spiritual guide to the sacred sites of the earth. And some of her acclaimed books include The Emissary, Before We Leave You, Messages from the Great Whales and the Dolphin Beings, Where Pharaohs Dwell, Cosmos of Soul, Atlantis Rising, No More Secrets, No More Lies, the Sirian Revelations. And she's president of Saving Earth's Oceans, which is, I think, something very important that we should all be concerned about. So to begin with, how did you end up on this path of being an intuitive channel?
Well, an intuitive, I think, is something that you can develop. But as a child, I was a very psychic kid, and I had the good fortune of having a mother who, the work with the Syrian High Council was springboarded when I went into a crop circle, a very famous crop circle in 1996 called the Julia Set, which was a huge, let's say, contact point for other levels of consciousness, and many people were driven to be there, and I was one of the lucky ones that got called to be there. And I got a sort of tune-up in there and actually went out of my body for 2 hours. And when I plopped back in, it took forever to really come back in completely to my body. But when I got back in, there was something that had changed dramatically. And 2 weeks after that, I started receiving the messages of the Syrian High Council, which have become, this is my, I think 11 books. And now I have the new book, The Emissary, which is not exactly a channeled book, but certainly has that influence as well.
Mm-hmm. That's an amazing story. So I know that you've been receiving messages from the Syrian High Council and also the cetacean beings. So
Yes.
could you share with us what are the main messages that they have for humanity?
The Syrian High Council has been very busy for so many years now, helping humanity understand our role in the bigger picture, the galactic reality. And of course, we've heard the term Galactic Federation used quite a bit, but they are, let's say, intent upon helping us recognize that we're not alone in the universe, that councils and beings from many civilizations are watching, because there's a lot of talk about dark ETs on the interfering in the earth, and they remind us that there is also a body of light-bodied, higher consciousness beings, and even Christed extraterrestrials who are intent upon assisting the earth. When I say that, I would like to bring home the idea that I don't think we need anybody to come and save us. In fact, when I speak about this, I'm pretty intent upon this. We don't want to create a sense of powerlessness while we sit here and wait for the good ETs to come and fix our dilemma, because there are some serious issues on this earth, but rather that there is a focus on this planet, and that beings from many dimensions and light and dark beings have interest in this planet.
Very well put. I agree with that, that we're kind of the center of attention. There's a lot of beings that have an interest in what's happening with us here on this planet, with our civilization.
Very much
But
so.
either way, we have to take responsibility for our own lives.
Well, that's the thing, and we also have to take responsibility for not only our individual lives, but also for the planet, because we're the guardians of this earth, and in some ways, we're not doing a very good job of taking care of the ecosystems. And so this is a very key passion of mine. I'm an activist and let's say an eco activist. And of course, I'm an activist for the oceans as well, as you noted.
Yes.
And I just think that it's time for us to get into gear. There's no more time to wait now.
Hmm. With the oceans, what are you being shown or told is occurring with them at this time?
We have all kinds of interference in the ocean from the plastic situation. We're going to be known as the plastic civilization. Is that how bad is that as a label?
Hmm.
There was the industrial age, the technological age, and we will be known as the plastic age. And that really doesn't work for me because we know how long-lasting plastic is. It just doesn't break down.
Hmm.
So we need to, I think, as a primary concern is the plastic in our water and the plastic in the oceans, and of course all over the earth as well. But this plastic in the oceans has now formed into 5 continents, or let's say islands,
Hmm.
that are masses of plastic in the ocean. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I've actually seen some of those pictures online where it looks like this giant island and it's all plastic
That's exactly what it is.
congealed together in the middle of the ocean.
Yes, there's one in the Pacific that is larger, they say. I haven't been there, but it's reported to be larger than the state of Texas.
Hmm.
And there are 4 more in diverse locations. So this is not something that's going to go away. In fact, it's getting worse. And we have to, first of all, figure out how to get those islands out of there, which is no small feat. I mean, how do you remove the state of Texas?
That's a good question, right? It
Right.
takes a lot of effort.
It does, and intention and money. And there you go. There's the question. When do you get corporate to invest in a cleanup
Hmm.
situation of that magnitude? But I just believe that uh, our pressure can still be very effective. So the first thing is to clean up these plastic islands, and of course to teach and educate people to stop using the plastic, and certainly to stop throwing it on the beaches, and everything ends up in the water. So we have to be so
Hmm.
much more mindful of how we can recycle these terrible, terrible, invasive bottles, bags, etc., in the oceans. And then there are other factors that are very important. We still have a big problem with human sewage. In some places, it's going right in raw into the oceans. We have a terrible problem with sonar, which is one of my, let's say, themes
Hmm. Right,
that
that
I
was
keep
mentioned
driving
in your
home.
book.
Yes. And that sonar is really disturbing to the mammals, the sea mammals, because they echolocate
Hmm.
and everything about them is sound. So if their sound is being disturbed by these blasts of sonar, and that's from the military, it's from fishing boats, it's from drilling companies, even the sound of ships, not sonar necessarily, but the roaring of engines and jet skis, all of this sound is reverberating in the oceans, and it's very stressful and sometimes fatal
Mm.
to the whales and dolphins.
Yes. Since you bring up sound, are you at all into any methods of using sound in positive ways, like for healing?
Yes, for many, many years I was a healer. I worked one-on-one with people. I love Tibetan bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people use the crystal bowl, but I have a collection of used for incredible work that everything really is vibration. If even the quantum scientists are bringing this home to us. Everything is vibration. And even the question of what is a particle in the end is a certain congealing of atoms that
Mm-hmm.
conform to a certain vibrational pattern. So knowing that, it's no mystical thing to know that sound has a direct effect on the human body and most likely on the whole planet. And this is another reason why it's so important to stop the sonar and the noise interference in the ocean, because I think it's affecting even the movements of the ocean, even the wave patterns can be affected, not just the animals there, but actually the essence of the water, I think,
Mm-hmm.
can be affected by sound interference there.
Yes, water would be the universal receiver, right? So
Exactly.
whatever sounds or other energies are there are going to imprint the water.
Exactly, and been shown that by Dr. Emoto, who gave us these wonderful images of crystallized frozen water molecules. And if you haven't heard of his work, it's an amazing field of work called Messages in Water. And he collected water samples from around the world, and some of them appeared frozen as six-sided stars, and others were lumpy or broken or shattered looking. And he did these exercises and experiments where he would pray to them or speak to them or send them loving messages, and then he would photograph them again, and they would already be forming back into these crystalline snowflake-like patterns.
Yes.
And his point was that water retains memory, and if we can speak to the water and love it, everything thrives on love. And I think that's a very positive understanding of how sound can affect the waters in your body, the waters of the planet.
Absolutely. Now, as individuals, what do you suggest or encourage that each of us can do to help address some of these issues that you've raised about the ecosystem, about the waters and the oceans?
Well, my work as my beginning work, let's say, because the organization is still very new, I find so many people in synchronicity about the crisis and the urgency to do something, but many people don't know what to do. And so I tell them, do something, whether it's sending a few dollars to an organization that you believe in, and hopefully Save Our Oceans can be on that list. Even though we're young, we are very small. We have I work without any salary at all for this, just from the heart. And funding is really important so that you don't have interference from corporate sponsors. And get out on the beach, pick up some plastic bottles. Whenever I go to the beach, I bring a big black trash can, and I pick up the garbage. And my husband says, "Why are you doing this?" Because he thinks it's a little strange. But I say, because it's strewn with garbage, and we can do this. Put on a pair of plastic gloves and help me. And it's amazing what I can pick up, just one person. In an hour, I can fill 2 trash cans or big black bags.
Right.
So imagine if every week a group of people got together in their local beach areas and cleaned up the beach.
Right.
Because what's not happening is the government isn't funding these things. It's up to us. And this is my point to people. It's up to us. Don't wait for anyone else to fix this problem when you can do something. And another thing that's very important, I think, is to stop frequenting SeaWorlds and these aquatic parks, because they are stealing these beautiful beings away from their pods and forcing them to act like circus clowns. And this has to stop. To think that a mighty, majestic dolphin or whale is ripped out of the ocean where the music of his pod still sings and forced into a cement cage, water cage, to leap through hoops to humans is barbaric. Barbaric. So I think that my suggestion to people is be mindful, be aware, look around you. How can you improve even one thing? And whether that's the oceans or whether it's your neighborhood, one thing can make a difference.
You make a good point that it starts with mindfulness of just being aware of how we're living.
Indeed.
So if we just start out with those small things, it creates a ripple effect.
Exactly.
So one person doing it, then another, and soon you have a whole movement, a whole wave of change happening.
And for example, in Miami, I gave a workshop there, and I'm sorry we didn't meet there. And one of the women was very moved by what I was saying about the whale. So she said she's going to get her daughter, who is very eco-conscious, and their school, and they're going to start cleaning up the beaches. And she wants me to be part of that activity, to sponsor, support it. And she's going to go to the local businesses and ask them for donations. And that's how we do it. Imagine kids, especially because children have to, they're going to be the guardians of this planet. They, more than us, they need to move into action and become aware, or I don't know what they're going to find.
Right. Their health and well-being will depend on what happens
Yes, and fortunately, we are looking at a generation of very, let's say, some very powerful kids are coming in right now, known as the indigos or the crystal children.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's also very exciting. So it just seems to me that the universe knows what it's doing. We have a new generation of awake children coming in, and it's going to take some guardianship and some guidance to help them uh, focus on what really matters. And that would not be the cell phone and the iPad and all of the other technology, but the
Right.
earth, the earth, the
Right.
earth. And we're seeing, I'd like to add this, Jed,
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing the extinction of an extraordinary amount of species,
Yes,
and
we
we
are.
have to change that.
Right. It's all over the news if people pay attention to that,
Indeed.
that our planet is under threat.
Absolutely. And the animals, what, imagine a world with no animals except in the zoo. I mean, that's like a science fiction movie.
Mm-hmm.
And animals enrich our lives. They give color to the incredible backdrop that
Mm-hmm.
is this beautiful planet. And so that's why I'm an animal activist, and I'm hoping that we can steer things in the right. I'm an optimist. I believe we can
Mm-hmm.
still change the negative effect of our abuse and wake up in time to make the changes that are going to bring the earth back to balance.
I appreciate the positive outlook.
Always. I mean, I'm not afraid to talk about the problems,
Mm-hmm.
and I think if you've read my books, you know that I do present them.
Right, right.
But
We need the
always,
awareness of what's actually happening in
yes,
order to stop and make changes.
yeah, because otherwise we sit in this ennui of powerlessness where we just keep the mantra, everything is perfect, everything is wonderful, which is lovely, and it's definitely an I am uh, technique.
Mm-hmm.
But my way, and I certainly don't want to impose it on anyone, but
Mm-hmm.
my way is to know that yes, that's true. We do manifest what we believe in, but let's not be afraid to look at the problems
Mm-hmm.
because rather than just I'm not a person who can just sit and do nothing and say, I'm manifesting everything beautiful and wonderful in my life. I'm a warrior for this planet,
Mm-hmm.
and my life isn't enough. I want to affect change for as much as I can for everything around me and everything far reaching that I can change for the
Mm-hmm.
better.
It kind of compares to what we do in psychotherapy or spiritual growth work dealing with the shadow material.
Hmm.
So people, of course, want to feel better. They want to have these positive affirmations and improve their life, but often they have to go back and look at the shadow stuff, the wounds, the pain that they've been carrying to release that and confront it in order to achieve this positive, beautiful vision that they want to create. So
It
it's
rem-
really a balance.
it is. It reminds me of an old Star Trek movie where, excuse me if I take a minute to describe this.
Mm-hmm.
A guy comes on the ship. The ship. I'm talking about the old Captain Kirk days.
Kirk. Right.
And this man comes on the ship and he starts to take over the ship by telling everyone. He comes on as an ambassador, and little by little, he starts to take over the ship by convincing everyone that he can remove their pain. And so he
Mm-hmm.
does this heebie-jeebie on everybody, and then they turn into these almost robots of, oh God, I have no more pain. I'm full of bliss. And they become followers of this
Mm-hmm.
man. And when he approaches Captain Kirk, who is the hero of par excellence,
Yes.
Kirk has this wonderful oratory where he says, "My pain? I don't want to lose my pain. It made me who I am. It guided me to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take my pain away. I understand my pain." And I thought, wow, isn't that a
What a beautiful
beautiful,
message, yes.
yeah, my pain is made me who I am. And I really agree with that. Our pain and suffering is first of all our own creation.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we don't want to look at it or however are we going to free ourselves from it?
Amen.
Aho.
So, in your workshops, you've been teaching about DNA activation.
Yes.
So, I would like you to share a little bit about what that process is like, what it's about, what people might expect from that.
Um, my early books talk about how we were seeded on the earth as 12-stranded DNA beings, and that would be Christ consciousness. Now, it's a rather complex explanation, and if people want to know details, they can read Atlantis Rising. Have you read that, Jed?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so
Yes.
that's a very complex, but it's not a hard read, but it really gives the entirety of that concept.
Mhm.
We were 12-stranded beings, and because we were designed by committees, galactic uh, beings, whose desire it was to create a highly evolved light beings in body species to be guardians of the earth and even further out from the earth. And this went awry, let's say, when there was intervention from the famous Anunnaki, which many people are familiar with. And this is quite a
Mhm.
little bit different from the take that Sitchin has made on who the Anunnaki were. But at any rate, according to the council, the Syrian High Council, these beings interfered with that blissful state of the higher human being, or Homo sapiens, from even way back before Atlantis.
Mhm.
And when they threw a grid around this planet, and 10 strands of DNA were scrambled. This information was also brought forward by Barbara Marciniak in
Marciniak,
her
yes.
wonderful book, Bringers of the Dawn.
Mhm.
It's a slightly different take, but again, it resonates with me, and I really celebrate that work. And these 10 strands of DNA are what our scientists and doctors and researchers call the junk DNA. And I am calling people to think about that. Now, seriously, in the perfection of all creation, would a divine entity, a God, whatever you wish to call that, put material in us that serves no purpose? Junk? That is just foreign to me.
Mhm.
What
It
it
doesn't make
takes,
sense, right?
not at all. Junk DNA, the majority of our DNA is junk. And we've let the researchers get away with that idea, giving them when we talk about science and left brain, and then we propose things from a mystical point of view, we're usually shot down as it can't be proven. And yet
Mhm.
there's no proof of that. All they say is it's junk. And that makes me
Mhm.
laugh.
Right, it's what they don't understand, so they make up an explanation.
Junk DNA. And this has gone on for centuries. And then the other wonderful nomenclature is that 96% or 92%, I think, of our brains is gray. And what I'm teaching here is that DNA that's been disassembled or scattered, and the 92% of our brain are completely connected. And
Mhm.
that once we unscramble this information, we will light up certain regions of the brain, and one of these is the pineal gland.
Mhm.
So that's what the workshop is about. It's awakening the pineal gland, recalling some of this material into a new DNA matrix
Mhm.
where these pieces begin to remember their function. And it's very exciting because in Russia, I think last year they discovered a girl with 3 strands of DNA. So it's happening, it's unfolding, and I do these workshops with people where through deep altered and deep meditation, we envision the perfected DNA assembly itself work, and it's
Mhm.
usually, let's say, life changing for a lot of people.
Fascinating. Yes.
I wish you had been there in
Yes.
Miami.
It's amazing how our consciousness is able to transform what's here on the physical plane. So we have these physical bodies, but really there's this construct of energy and information informing what we're seeing physically. And if we're able to shift things at that energetic and consciousness level, everything can transform.
And we
Uh,
do understand that. That's
mhm.
why we get expressions like mind over matter.
Mhm.
We do know that the conscious mind alters matter all the time, and that's why scientists are never able to get an objective read on any research they do, because the mere essence of observing an experiment alters the experiment. So
Yes.
this is the exciting information that's coming now from the quantum physicists who really get that,
Mhm.
and we're getting science coming closer to the spirit community.
Right. It is an exciting time. that we're able to bridge the scientific and the spiritual and get a cohesive understanding.
It is.
So, in your work, there's reference to the idea of ascension, and there's a lot of people out there in the New Age and different traditions who talk about ascension, but not necessarily having the same concept or understanding of what that means. So can you describe from your understanding what ascension refers to?
Well, that's a great question. It's a big question, Jed, but it's a great question. There is a lot of confusion about ascension, and there's never going to be a right answer until we're on the other side of it, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
But what comes through the Sirian High Council is that the immensity of our situation on the Earth and the whole solar system is that ascension is not about us as individuals, but rather, and it's not just about the Earth, it's about the whole solar system. And they describe, again in that book, Atlantis Rising, how our sun is preparing to go through its own astral cord into a higher phase of existence, of consciousness. And it sounds pretty out there when you first hear it, because our conception of celestial bodies, it's so immense. We're like a little ant on this gigantic plane of reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, if you consider that the nature of consciousness, by the nature of consciousness would have to include the possibility that the sun and all the planets are also conscious beings, especially when we embrace the idea of the microcosm and the macrocosm.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are representative of, let's say, of the Earth, then by nature of that comparison, the Earth has to be a conscious being. And of course, I think that most of us who are spiritual in our pursuits recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the Earth would be a microcosm of a greater body of beings, and it just keeps going on and on and on until who knows what infinite state of reality exists. I stuck out there in the galactic plane, and I lost my point.
Okay, yeah, about the idea of ascension.
Thank you.
And
okay, so the councils say that the sun is going to travel through its own astral cords, and we're moving through with it, and that means ascension of the entire solar system, rather than just individual ascensions, mm-hmm. personal process. And what that means would be all the planets in our solar system reaching a higher state, a refined state, a less dense state of being. Mm-hmm. And that's very exciting. And in fact, when we look at what's going on in our solar system, all the planets are heating up, they're spinning faster. I mean, mm-hmm. I take that back, they're not all spinning faster, but we are hearing of extraordinary phenomena on all the planets, not just Earth. Mm-hmm. The sun is mutating like crazy. A few days ago, NASA filmed this gigantic solar flare, which I think is relevant. And so I think that we are facing the possibility that the whole system is going to achieve let's say a less polarity, less density, mm-hmm. and that we will be consciously alive for that.
That would be incredible.
Yeah, we're ready for that, and I think that's got a lot to do with mm-hmm. the great shift of ages as well. So mm-hmm. one of the reasons why I believe that there's a lot of interest in us, not only our planet, I think our solar system, is because the whole Megillah is about to move into this, through the astral tube, and into, of course, the scientists would call that the black hole, but the council call that the astral tube of the sun. Mm-hmm. And I think this is coming up very closely, and it's not about disaster, it's enlightenment.
That's what we're hoping for, right?
That is what we're hoping for.
But it's still, in a way, up to us how we either flow with or not with this transformation. So if we want to get the full benefit of ascension, we have to do our own individual work. That's what I feel.
I agree with that, yes. I mean, if your life is about murder and corruption and pain and suffering, I don't think you're going to get automatic enlightenment simply
Mm-hmm.
because these celestial things are going on. Most likely, that I think that at a certain point, if you haven't refined your essence, then probably that process of ascension would be more like a process of death. And even that's okay
Mm-hmm.
because death is a transition.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps if the soul isn't participant in the ascension process, it will simply rebirth on some other physical plane,
Mm-hmm.
physical planet, until it has completed its circle of karmic
Mm-hmm.
resolution.
Right. Right. It's not that
It's
there
all
is
good.
such a thing. There is no ultimate death. It's just a
Exactly.
transition from one experience to another.
Exactly. And the people that are stuck in lower energies, they are not done with the density. They've got to keep learning until they get it right, let's say, where they've resolved a lot of those uh, deeply conflictual lower energies.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Great. Your volume just like jumped up.
would you like
Could
me
you,
to lower it?
yeah, if you could lower it a little bit.
Alrighty. That's weird. How's that? Is that good?
Still sounds loud.
That's really strange. Now I
Unless,
can barely hear you.
hmm,
All right, let's hold on a minute.
let's pause, yeah.
Why would that have happened? How about now?
That's a little better, yeah.
How about now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
It's okay. It's a little on the high side, but it'll work all right. I could always edit later.
All right, well, I'll lower it. How about now? Does this sound good? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, it sounds clear. It just sounds a lot higher in volume than it had before. But I'll have to go back and listen later
That's
and see how it comes out on the recording. Okay, so let's get back to our discussion.
alrighty.
Now, in I think it was your website talking about your workshops, you mentioned that people should not be using psychopharmaceuticals if they're planning to do the DNA activation. I wanted to see what your perspective is on both the synthetic psychotropic drugs and also the herbal psychedelic types of drugs that people in the New Age community sometimes use with the idea of trying to go into altered states of consciousness.
You know, first of all, let's talk about the pharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm.
And by and large, these are meant to numb you, completely
Mm-hmm.
numb you, and create almost a zombie state. So I don't want anyone that is on these drugs to come anywhere near the workshop because we're working on subtle energy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a counterproduction, let's say,
Right.
and I just can't, I just don't want to work with that. So if someone is using pharmaceuticals to numb themselves, they are not in any way
There.
prepared to do this
Right.
kind of work on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
With regard instead to those kinds of things like ayahuasca, I'm sure you're talking about, which is
Mm-hmm.
very popular right now, and other, let's say, hallucinatory medicine. The question is this: do you want a shortcut and have a momentary peek at another reality? Or do you want to do the long-term work on yourself where you take those steps as is appropriate to your own growth
Mm-hmm.
and awaken as naturally? And that is a choice everyone has to make. The problem that's happening is that a lot of the people that are using these psychotropic drugs are having these momentary wild visions and becoming more dependent on the idea that they can only have them with the drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So, excuse excuse me, I'm not in judgment of that. I was a child of the 70s. I had my own experiences. So I'm not in judgment of that, but I do advise people to exercise caution because a lot of people are capitalizing on these seekers,
Mm-hmm.
and there are a lot of false shamans and a lot of nefarious characters that are presenting themselves as enlightened guides
Mm-hmm.
through the Aya or other uh, Pedro is another one, etc.
Right.
If you're in the hands of a really powerful shaman, and those are few and far between, and he can serve as a guide to these other worlds, and you want to experience them, this is your own decision to make. But
Mm-hmm.
I really think there's no greater high than the breakthroughs that come at your own pace with an open heart.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's something we all have the power to access using our own inner development and
Yeah,
not depending on something that just kind of blows the door open without us being prepared.
that's exactly a beautiful way to describe it, Jed. And that is what happens. And a lot of people uh, really freak themselves out. A lot of people are damaged by that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because how you beautifully said that, leaving the door open. A lot of people don't know how to close that door when they come back from the trip.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a poison. You hallucinate because the body's poisoned.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of is let's say, counterproductive for people who are really on the path of spirit, totally holistic,
Mm-hmm.
using herbs and natural remedies, and then they dose themselves with all these poisonous plants.
Mm-hmm.
And you
Mm-hmm.
hallucinate because of that.
Right. Right.
And but there are a lot of people using it, and
Mm-hmm.
so I don't want to in any way be in judgment of these people, other than to say, please be careful,
Mm-hmm.
because every day I'm hearing about even people dying out in Brazil because they're with people that are not qualified,
Mm-hmm.
whipping up this ayahuasca and all these other juices and things.
Right. Right.
But
I could.
I am
Right.
a firm
Mm-hmm.
believer in the empowerment of the other, and
Mm-hmm.
that only we can make the judgment call for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Right. We each have our own path and our own lessons to go through. So
Absolutely.
it's not for you or I to judge or condemn someone who wants to try those things.
That's right. I just
Mm-hmm.
exercise caution. And this I say openly, exercise caution. Do your homework. If you're going to Brazil or to some of these other places where you can access these things, don't take the first image of a website that says, have a shamanic experience, come and join us. Make sure you know who you're dealing with, where you're
Mm-hmm.
going, and hopefully don't go alone.
Right.
But know who you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. So we have just a little bit of time left, and I wanted to get your take on anything significant you see happening in current events on the planet, whether it's political, economic, environmental, anything you think would be valuable for people to be aware of, to perhaps see from a different perspective.
Well, obviously, we are all in a state of concern because we're seeing a lot breaking down, and we're seeing the threat of things breaking down. For example, the economic system. And this has people all in a flutter, justifiably. And what I tell people is that maybe it does have to come down. If we're going to birth a new world, a lot of these old structures do have to come down. They're controlling, they're malfunctioning, and they're corrupt.
Mm-hmm.
So, as much as I can, I try to encourage in people the idea that going with the flow of this and instead of trying to control or resist it, is going to make it all that much easier. And maybe you will lose your house. Maybe you will lose your boat. But what would be replaced by that if we are responsible and conscious citizens rather than chaos may very well be a return to a much greater humanity where we work together and we live together and we build our communities together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a sort of utopic because I don't see how that could happen in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but to consider a lifestyle where you're not in a mega area where people are on top of each other, really like rats, and rather explore the possibility of living more simply.
Mm-hmm.
And then, with all of the problems that we're facing, I think that if you're getting closer to nature, you will already be in a much better position to cope with the changes. I think there are going to be more severe weather changes, and I think a lot of this is deliberate.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that let's say, the military is working on weather control and doing a
Mm-hmm.
pretty good job of that. And so we need to consider, do you really need to have a house on the water? There are some things we can do to make this easier, but I think, yes, I think there are going to be more cataclysmic events,
Mm-hmm.
and it's almost as if the earth is shaking us off
Hmm.
and trying to get herself free of these abuses. And so what we can do is know that there is no safe place except in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that might sound trite, but it works for me. And then as much as possible to be closer to the earth and simplify as much as possible your life. As far as
Mm-hmm.
the grid, the telecommunications grid, I would love to see it break down a little bit because we are so dependent on it now. We're becoming automatronized. And I'm here in Manhattan for the first time in 30 years, and every single person I see on the street is walking around with a headphone set plugged
Mm-hmm.
into a iPad or a phone.
Right.
And I'd be more than happy to see that come down a little bit. Maybe not completely because we need some
Mm-hmm.
of it, but to restructure things so that we have less dependency on
Mm-hmm.
technology. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for the changes. What I do want is I want them to happen. I want whatever needs to happen so that we can see how beautifully we pick up our pieces, brush ourselves off, and move on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think something is coming, and I think it's going to be difficult, but I think we'll rise above it.
The crisis is really the opportunity. That's the way to look at it.
Absolutely. And if you consider that it seems to me that we don't really get off of our assets until we're up against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
We are, when we're comfortable, we hang out. Life is good.
Right.
We don't
Right.
really affect big change. It's when we are not comfortable that we stand up, and we are definitely becoming very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And for so long, it's been over there. So all the war and destruction is somewhere else, and it's really too bad, or it's really sorry for them, but it doesn't touch us, so we don't create change so that
Mm-hmm.
injustice around the world can be balanced out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's happening now. I think that it's in our face now, and that the human race is rising. I have great faith in the human race.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're not just the human race, we're spiritual beings that
That's
are
right.
connected to the Creator, that
Absolutely.
have all this great wisdom and love within us. We've just kind of forgotten about it, getting caught up in the material dramas and the picture of civilization that's been pushed on us.
Indeed.
But but we can turn things around, and I think, like you said, when the pressure comes, when we're back against the wall, that's when we start to do it.
And we are remembering who we really are. That's another very
Mm-hmm.
important thing. We are remembering that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And the light is rising on this planet, even though sometimes it appears very dark. So many people are rising. Spirit is rising, right on schedule.
Indeed, yes. It's all part of this intelligent plan that our human processing can't fully perceive, right?
Exactly. Well, not necessarily completely can't, but we've been distracted. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're beginning to get focused, and we're remembering what we came here to do. And by George, we're going to do it. This is not going to be another fall of
Mm-hmm.
Atlantis. This is not the way this is going to play out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to thank you for taking your time, for devoting your energy to spread the word.
Thank you, Jed. It was wonderful. And thank you for all the good work you're doing and your support for my work. I know I've seen some of your reviews, I think, and
Right,
articles. So I
right.
thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Namaste. You have a wonderful day.
Namaste. You too.